Okay, everybody, here we are. It is 2:45, and we are digging in for an hour with some data. I hope you're all excited. Fortunately, it's freezing cold in here, so we should all stay nice and awake. The other thing working in our favor is that, in my opinion, the things we're talking about here today are some of the least dry, least boring data-related topics you could possibly be talking about. I'm going to focus a little bit on some history in and around how companies have been enabled by data and using data to make better decisions. But I'm going to spend most of my time on real practical analyses that are things that individual companies can do with very little incremental technology, very little incremental investment in infrastructure, and that honestly in most cases were not even really doable 10 years ago or even 5 years ago in some cases, that we've seen through the various companies that I've worked with to be very effective in allowing people to basically become more truly data-driven in how they build their companies. So I am excited to dig in here, but before I start talking about examples and things, I want to spend a little bit of time on this concept of core values, just core beliefs that we have, or at least that I have going into this talk around what's going on in the world of data. And one thing that is just going to be underpinning everything I'm talking about here, and that I'm not going to spend a lot of time making a case for or arguing, and that I hope you all generally agree with me on, is that data-driven decisions equal better decisions. At Stitch, at RJ Metrics, the two companies I've co-founded here in the city, this is very much a big part of our own value system. And the idea that we work on every single day is that if we can help people make more data-driven decisions, we will help make the world a better place, because things will be more efficient, people will be happier, more value will get created, every extra bit of work will be that much more important. And if you dig into the data, there are all kinds of places where you can find evidence of this. Kind of two dimensions are studies that tell you that companies that use data tend to perform better, which are coming out more and more frequently as data collection in these areas gets better. And the other piece is just where people kind of vote with their wallets, and showing the amount of dollars that are being spent on things like big data software and hardware, professional services around big data, and just kind of consulting in and around that space. So the cross side of this is that despite data-driven decisions being better decisions, most companies are still ROI negative on analytics. And having spent the last 5 or 6 years of my career kind of working in analytics, it pains me to say this, but the reality is that I meet way more companies that have invested major dollar amounts in using data, using analytics, pursuit of this ideal of we are going to become a data-driven company, and ended up not realizing the actual benefits of that in any kind of reasonable time frame. There are so many more companies that are in the process of becoming more data-driven today than are actually at this utopian spot of using data to make every single decision. And a lot of what underpins what I'm talking about today is kind of bridging that gap a little bit by creating value. Another core value that I think we need to just kind of ride on here is, this is insane. This is a infographic of just the marketing technology landscape and all of the primarily software as a service companies, so third-party companies that can help you build your business more quickly in one way or another. There are all these different subcategories. You can make a bunch of points about the market by looking at this slide, but there's one that really matters today for our purposes, which is that every single one of these companies on this slide is another silo where your data can exist. Another place where this business knows something about your customers, about your business, that you don't necessarily know as a primary collector of that data. And that makes the process of analyzing your data and knowing your customers all that much more complicated. So you get these problems, and really the good news that we'll dig into here is that there are tools and communities that have emerged that make it much easier for you to manage all of this, for you to bring it all together into one spot and not have to always hire an entire team to get the job done. So because of that, the final core value that I want to start off with here is that the surest path to ROI is by combining lean infrastructure and narrow applications. So figuring out ways to get up and running so that you can answer questions with data, and then finding very specific problems that you want to solve with that data, and making the investments to bring that to life. So today's talk is about those two areas. I'm going to talk a little bit about infrastructure. I'm going to talk about the technology that has emerged in the last few years that enables people to use their data in better and more efficient ways. And then I'm going to talk about applications. And we're going to dig into, once you've got that set up, what are some examples that real companies have used to grow their businesses faster as a result of that. So let's talk about the analytics tech stack here. So I co-founded a company called RJ Metrics back in 2008. RJ Metrics was a business intelligence software company that got acquired last year by a company called Magento, and also resulted in the spin out of an awesome company called Stitch that I'll tell you a little bit more about as we talk about the tools landscape. But I want to start by rewinding the clock to 2008, because I think walking through the history of data and data-related tools will tell us a lot about where we are today and what's possible. So in 2008, khaki shorts were way in. This is me. This is my co-founder Jake in the attic in the proverbial kind of startup phase here. There were so many things that were wildly, wildly different at this point in time, which was less than 10 years ago. Amazon Web Services was basically non-existent. It was there, but it was very, very sparsely used. Amazon itself was not even on Amazon Web Services yet. SSD, solid state drives, were completely impractical. They were something we looked at in the early days of potentially using to store the data inside of our analysis platform, and the costs were just absolutely astronomical, unbelievable compared to what's there today. If you open up a browser and you wanted to build a visualization or a chart, Flash was still hands down the dominant means by which you could create interactive web elements. That obviously has completely changed at this point in time. And when it comes to data flowing around, APIs were, they're still not an amazing place, but they're in a much better place than they were in 2008. In a lot of cases with third-party services, they flat out did not exist. The standards around them were not kind of as widely known and practiced, and the documentation tended to be quite poor. So you end up in this place where you, as a operating company, typically it makes a lot of sense economically to just not think about data until you reach a certain scale. And this was where the market opportunity for RJ Metrics, the company, came from back 8 years ago, which was to create something which is this monolith, this one solution to rule them all, where you can basically have, kind of going from left to right here, a single piece of technology that a company could buy that would solve all these problems in one fell swoop. So you need to build these replication agents that go and talk to all the different data services where your data might live. Your backend databases, your email service providers, your marketing automation solutions, your customer success software and CRM. You need something that can actually absorb that data on a regular basis, make sure that it's continuously running, make sure that it's not redundantly pulling data, make sure that things are kept as close to real time as possible. And then once you've got all of that raw data from all these systems, you need to actually crunch that data. You need to cleanse it. You need to make sure that it's getting joined together in proper ways, that intermediate calculations are happening, and that the data ends up structured in such a way that you can trust it and that it's actually able to provide you with good insights. Then it's got to go somewhere. You actually need to host it. And then once it's hosted, you've got to have some kind of understanding of the business logic that sits on top of all that data. So even though it's cleansed, even though it's in a relatively predictably structured format, how do you define revenue? How do you define what a unique customer is and what their customer lifetime value is? All that logic needs to live somewhere. Then once you've got all that logic and you start running queries against it, those queries can be extremely slow running on the warehouse, so they've got to sit in a cache. And then you need a whole front-end interface for visualizing it. The moral of the story here is that solving this problem as a business and building it from the ground up in 2008 was something that required such a vast amount of resources that the BI industry was basically relegated to people that could afford to buy business objects and Cognos and these massive systems that had multi-$100,000 implementation price tags associated with them. And when we built RJ Metrics, what we really did was just cobbled together a bunch of largely open source tools that existed at the time to get something out the door that we could sell for a few $100s a month, typically to mid-market companies. So this was built on basically your standard LAMP stack with a little Redis thrown in there, and of course Flash on the front end. It worked for quite a bit of time as we watched the market drastically change into the 2015 era and beyond as to where we are today. And if you look at the market today and you look at all these logos that are down here, the vast majority of these things did not exist in 2010. And if they did exist, they were very, very far away from being widely used or useful. Now at this point in time, every single individual component that I just talked about in that analytics value chain has basically a best-in-class solution that has been built for it that allows people to, on a piecewise basis, put together the analytics infrastructure that is right for them. So on the replication side, Stitch, which is kind of a company that grew out of our learnings at RJ Metrics that is now based here in Philly, is the hands down, in my biased opinion, best way for you to get data out of these various disparate systems into a centralized repository for storing your data. In a lot of cases, transformation has either been dedicated to these individual platforms for data crunching in a distributed way, or completely bypassed and passed into the analytical data warehouse, where things like Redshift and BigQuery are actually able to crunch data at query time and do a lot of the cleansing and processing without these batch-based intermediate steps, which really, really speeds up the process. And then an awesome generation of tools like Looker, Mode, and Periscope, some of the newer offerings from Amazon, even around Amazon QuickSight, Tableau, who's an old favorite, but continues releasing new great products. All of these have really focused their energy on the visualization and the data modeling piece, and really made sure that they are not stretching out into these other areas. So what we witnessed over the course of, say, 2010 to 2016 was a complete shift in the purchasing power and the decision-making power in and around data inside of organizations, where with RJ Metrics, it is an all-in-one system that to this day, and by the way, this product still exists and is extremely widely used in the e-commerce industry. E-commerce, it makes a lot of sense for tools like these, largely because businesses can get to a relatively high revenue level, but still have a relatively small team. The number of dollars of revenue you have per rows of data in your system can be quite high. And because of that, and the very predictable nature of the business model, you get these benefits out of things like highly templated analytics, not really needing to customize your infrastructure in big ways, not always having a lot of technical end users, a pretty homogeneous look at what a business looks like from case to case to case. That's where these completely integrated systems can still be valuable, and where RJ Metrics still is. In the case where companies want complete flexibility, they want configurable infrastructure, they want to have an opportunity for the tech organization to own the analytics stack, that is where this beautiful combination of, and I just pull 3 companies here, but there are other ones you could slot in and out at each stage. If you use Stitch to get data into Redshift and you put Looker on top, like that, if you look at our customer base at Stitch today, if you even look at the universe of people that we see beyond our own customers, that is kind of what the killer stack looks like at the moment for companies where the technologists are in control. And I can say with absolute certainty, having watched the market over the last several years, that the technologists are absolutely taking control of the analytics organizations inside of companies. Whereas a few years back, it was absolutely the marketing organizations, the executives, and to some extent kind of the folks in the CIO's office that bridge the gap, but kind of answer more to business players in a lot of cases. This shift has been a pretty monumental thing, and it's really empowering for the folks at this conference and the folks in the room here, because it means that we get to make a lot of really great decisions around how we help grow our companies as technologists. So today's talk, they asked me to talk about lean analytics. And lean analytics, there's a book called Lean Analytics that you can buy, and it falls under the umbrella of Lean Startup, which hopefully many of you have seen and read, and if you haven't, I encourage you to do so. The Lean Startup is something that started as a book and kind of turned into a movement. This guy, Eric Ries, presented a lot of case studies and research and arguments for kind of building businesses with a few core tenets in mind. And there are 3 of them that I want to highlight here, because really, when we think about lean analytics, it is simply the application of these tenets from Lean Startup to the universe of data and analytics. So the main tenets here are this idea of minimum viable prototypes or minimum viable products. If you hear that phrase somewhere, it really originated, or at least first came into wide popular use through the lean startup. The idea being that you can invest minimal energy to produce something that can be measured. Build something that can get out there into the market where you can generate measurable events, and then that can then inform the goodness of product market fit on what you're working on and how you might then move on to improve your product or iterate. And this feeds into this concept of the build, measure, learn cycle, where you're constantly building new products, measuring the things, how the market is responding to those products, and then taking those measurements and those learnings and feeding it right back into the build phase. And this continuous development, which kind of almost necessitates continuous deployment, which is something we all take for granted at this point, particularly those of us running SaaS businesses, but continuous deployment really is almost a prerequisite to having an extremely agile lean startup running. These things all fit together to give us this idea that if we can measure and we can analyze, then we can build better businesses faster. So when I talk about lean analytics today and we step through some of these examples, you'll see these things continuing to come up, and it's all in service of learning quickly and iterating quickly. So the cool thing is that today's data stack is just an absolute goldmine when it comes to lean analytics in a way that even 5 years ago, that was not the case. So again, you've got options to match your resources. If you want to decide to invest developer time in place of investing dollars, you can absolutely do that. You can build something that costs effectively nothing or next to nothing using largely open source software that fits together very well and very seamlessly and build a best-in-class analytics stack today. Or alternately, you can invest dollars. You can invest in some of these platforms that you may pay for that are a little more all-in-one integrated, or you can hire third-party service providers that will come in and do a lot of that work for you. The other thing that's cool is just the level of control and visibility. The vast majority of these tools I've been talking about, if you prefer to run them on premise, you can do so. If you prefer to find a cloud vendor that will take care of uptime and infrastructure management and everything, you can do so as well. The industry has gotten pretty mature in this relatively short amount of time, and that has enabled a ton of flexibility as to how you configure and organize your own analytics stack. The other thing is just there are a lot of people out there talking about this stuff. You can find, thanks to the wonders of a combination of content marketing becoming a really, really popular way for companies to get customers, and the existence of things like Stack Overflow and GitHub as centralized communities where people can discuss these topics in ways that kind of have a great user experience and allow for sharing code and sharing learnings in a really efficient way. You combine those two things and all of a sudden the ability for you to find the answer to a very specific question that may seem way, way, way down the long tail is actually something that's better than it's ever been. And because of that, there's never been a better time to learn this stuff. There's never been a more readily available universe of content in and around it. So really, if your business isn't in a place where it's making these agile, data-driven decisions, you're living in the past. And there are so many fewer excuses than there were even just 5 years ago to go after this stuff. So let's do some of them. Let's dig in and do some real looking at some of this data here. I want to start with a relatively simple example that's actually from the e-commerce universe. It's from one of the customers of RJ Metrics, now Magento BI, and it's in and around customer acquisition ROI. So as a e-commerce provider, one of the most difficult things is deciding where to spend your money. The main growth strategy of most companies in e-commerce is to spend dollars on customer acquisition, advertising products, working through affiliate programs, offering promotions, et cetera. And this is probably the biggest question that we get when working with online merchants. And nowhere is it more true than in the flower industry. If you think about flowers, and this is a case study of an online flower store that we work with, that's one of the larger ones, that if you think about what happens when you buy flowers online, as I'm sure many of you have done, you actually end up spending dollars, sending them to a company that is operating an online website, and they pass that order on to some kind of local flower shop or fulfillment center in the majority of cases, who will then go on to actually put the flowers together, deliver the flowers, et cetera. You could not have a more commoditized product. Like, you don't even know when you're purchasing the thing that you're purchasing on the website precisely what it's going to look like, who is going to fulfill it, exactly when it's going to come in. This is maybe the purest form of a efficient market, because you can basically buy these flowers from any number of dozens of different vendors online and literally get the same product delivered to the same door. So winning in the flower space is not a function of great products. It is a function of great strategy around how you go to market, how you acquire customers, and how you figure out not how to go out of business in the course of doing that. So I love looking at this industry as a case study for marketing ROI, because there's no X factor here that is, I had the better flowers. The X factor here is you got to the customers in a smarter way, and data can be used to do that in a much better fashion. So we had this company that we were working with that had a very obvious challenge based on the description I just gave, which is how do we find the customer acquisition channels that actually are driving the highest customer lifetime value, the most loyal repeat customers, with all these unique challenges of the flower industry. And the answer, which should not be that surprising, is this idea of customer segmentation. Finding acquisition channels or customer attributes that are then associated with the most desirable properties of customers that we want to recruit. It's one thing to spend $50 and acquire a customer that spends $75 on a bouquet of flowers. It's another to spend $60 and then find somebody that'll buy a $75 bouquet every single anniversary for the rest of their relationship. Identifying customers that have a tendency to make repeat purchases, to come back and buy again, is a really high value thing. But the trick is that in a lot of cases, the data about what these customers do at the time of the purchase, after the purchase, in between purchases, do not all live in one spot. So you've got information sitting inside of your own backend database about transactions. You've also got back office systems that might know about fulfillment and deliverability and different geographies and how that plays in. You've got data in your advertising platforms that tells you how many dollars got spent to acquire each incremental customer through each campaign. Your email marketing provider knows about open rates, knows what campaigns people were placed on, knows which coupons and other promotional subject lines people might have responded to better. Your customer support system knows whether or not the people got their flowers on time or sent you a nasty email after the fact or a thank you email after the fact. And your web and mobile analytics know about all of the things in the top of the funnel, everything that happened up until that purchase got made, where the person came from, what pages they went to on the site, any information about the browser that they were using, whether they were on mobile or on desktop, etc. All of this data, all of these are inputs to this segmentation equation. And because of that, you really need to join all that data into one spot. And this is where joining these disparate silos into a centralized data warehouse in something like Amazon Redshift, using tools like Stitch or like RJ Metrics to do so, can become extremely valuable. And once you get this opportunity to pull, this is just an example of two different data sources. There's obviously all kinds of layers of cleansing and combining that can go on here, but the core idea is that you have one atomic unit of data that is your customer, and with each one of these new data sources that you connect, you can learn more and more things about the dimensionality of that customer, what they did, where they came from, what the attributes of them were. And then once you've got all that, you can do some deep segmentations and do some really cool stuff. So I'll give some examples of segmentations in a future example, but I want to talk about just the results that this flower shop saw by doing so, which is they really found a way to identify attributes of customers that were heavy, heavy drivers of repeat purchases, and found that repeat purchases were the largest possible driver of customer lifetime value, much more so than average order value, much more so than how much or how little they spent to acquire customers. They wanted to focus on repeat purchases because that drove CLV. And when they focused on repeat purchases, they found these attributes, certain pay-per-click advertising channels, certain geographic environments, certain times of year, even times of day that were working well. And we're able to focus those dollars and investments and drive the spending optimization way up, and therefore drive the growth of the business in a really successful way. And this continues to be a big client of ours that we love focusing time and energy on. So in the e-commerce universe, you get these cases that are really black and white. It's like someone bought something or someone didn't, or you have a certain dollar value and it's, we spent this much to acquire this person and they're worth this much in their lifetime. I want to talk about a story about a time in the history of RJ Metrics that was started out really challenging and ended up being really educational, where we applied some of these tactics in an area where it was not as black and white, where it was a little bit more challenging for us to figure out exactly what thing might matter the most to us in the course of acquiring customers. And there was a challenging moment where we we as a business, we always had a free trial. So you could get set up with RJ, you can have your dashboards deployed, you can get in and create charts and explore those charts, and at the 14-day mark, you either convert or you don't. You become a customer or you don't. But so many things happened during the free trial that could potentially be leading indicators as to whether or not someone's likely to convert. So the thesis that we had was that if we could identify particular actions that are associated with people converting, then we could potentially change the experience during the trial so that people are more likely to take those actions and more likely to have the experience that leads them to converting. And our goal here was really just to increase the free trial conversion rate. So we instrumented the heck out of the top of our funnel. All the things that were happening in the browser, all of the events you could possibly capture. In our particular case, we used a combination of Mixpanel and a tool called Snowplow, which allowed us to kind of host our own events tracking database and wire that data right into Amazon Redshift. But the important thing here is that these aren't transactions or purchases or anything. These are really, really early indications of action that are as simple as people clicking on certain things in their browser. So what you end up with is this giant table where you have these individual actions. And this thing ended up just being extremely huge for us. It was a giant Redshift cluster running this. And you've got this timestamp of when something happened. You have some information as to what happened. You have a unique identifier as to who did it or what client it's associated with. A bunch of metadata that helps us combine this data. Yes, sir?
So, am I getting this right? You guys are selling like a data analytics tool, but you're doing data analytics to figure out how to get more customers. Yeah,
absolutely. It is super dog foody. What's crazy too is that a lot of this stuff ends up getting fed back into our data analytics tool, so it's like a snake eating its own tail. Yeah, this is data on data on data. So you are looking at real data about people using a tool that they use to look at their real data. That is what's on the screen right now. And this all made it to the point where it's hundreds of millions of records of all these different events. And once you have all of that and you reach a point where you want to actually study the data, and we felt like we got a large enough population to be able to conduct that analysis, we were able to consolidate that data down really just to a bunch of attributes that you could associate with each free trial. So you end up in a place where you've got a client ID, you know this whether or not they converted, and then you have a bunch of these numeric values associated with them where you can identify things like how many charts did they create, how many users they create, how much data came in, how many different distinct data sources did they generate, et cetera, et cetera. And you really end up with the inputs to what becomes basically a multivariate logistic regression. A multivariate in that you've got all these different inputs that might be impacting whether or not somebody converts, and logistic in that really it's a binomial logistic regression where there's only two outputs, right? It's a categorical output, it's a yes or a no. And once you've got all that input data, you can do some really cool stuff and run a whole bunch of different tests. So we ended up running a bunch of just basic statistical hypothesis tests on this just to get an initial view of what might be influential in terms of people converting. And we started out with the thing that was actually our thesis on what might be the best converter, and the thing that had us investing in data integrations and more data sources, which is, we thought if they connect more data, they've got more data sources connected, they're more invested in it, they put more energy in, it's going to be stickier, they're more likely to convert. And we ran this test and we found out we were wrong. There was no statistically significant difference between people who connected a single data source and people who connected more than one data source in terms of whether or not they would convert. So we said, wow, good thing we captured all this other data. Let's see what else is going on here. And we ended up asking this question way down on the list of guesses, by the way. How about people creating their own charts? So when you log into your dashboard, by the way, you get like 100 charts right out of the box. Like, you got plenty of charts going on. But we also were capturing these events around people going through the motions of creating their own custom analyses. And what we found was that there was a wild statistical significance associated with people who created anything. So the difference between these consumers who just log in and take what is given to them with the charts that come built in with the implementation versus the people that actually go in and create their own custom definitions of things, that was a major statistically significant indicator of whether or not somebody would convert. And that told us enough that we double-clicked on that one or more, and we drilled down and actually looked at the number of specific charts or analyses that people built. And we were able to run these tests at each one of these steps and see when we fell out of statistical significance. And it was really remarkable in that the conversion rate for people that built no charts was worse than 1 in 3. It was 30%. And a pretty significant sample size here in the course of the time period we were looking at, as soon as they made a single chart, they jumped up to 48% likelihood of conversion. And as soon as they built that second chart, still within the bounds of statistical significance here, they jumped up to a 2 out of 3 chance. So from less than 1 out of 3 to 2 out of 3 chance of converting just by building charts. And this caused us to say, hey, we're learning about our customer and what drives them and what makes them see value in our product. And once they are in there and learning how to create their own analyses and really customize the platform, that's when they're going to convert. And this caused us to drastically change what our onboarding process looked like, what our training looked like, and really how our self-guided tours inside the product took you through the product and in what order. We built self-guided tours around the report builder specifically. We got in this practice of giving new clients homework where they had to go build a new chart before we would do a follow-up call with them. We beefed up the documentation on Report Builder, made it a lot better. And we saw this extremely drastic improvement in conversion rate. This is real data from, this was in the late 2013 period when we did this, but the implementation of this really just by using data that we already had, that we were able to capture and analyze using systems that were readily available to us, doubled our effective conversion rate. And throughout the rest of the history of the company, our conversion rate kind of hovered around this 60 to 70% band. And honestly, it's kind of where it is today. But had we never done that work before, it was amazing for how long we were hovering in this 30 to 40 band as well. So these major, major impacts. I mean, this is a doubling of the revenue and also just a major improvement in the cost of customer acquisition, because you're basically converting twice as many customers, so you're cutting that CAC number in half, which is a really exciting thing. So that was a really great experience for us. And I want to talk a little bit about some other companies again as well. This one is just a little bit of a small, quick, one-and-done case just to show how easy it is to be opportunistic about things in an e-commerce use case. This is where a client of ours saved thousands and thousands of dollars with what equated to about 15 minutes of work in somebody's day one day, because they came up with an idea and they had the right data at their fingertips. This is an omni-channel retailer that is kind of unique in their business model in that they're a catalog retailer, they have brick and mortar stores, and they sell online, and they sell literally everything from t-shirts to boats. Like you can actually literally buy sailboats on their website and their catalog and in their store. So they get this big array of customers, big array of customer profiles, and because they're a catalog retailer, adding a new prospect, somebody that they want to go and market to, is actually really expensive because they have these beautiful glossy catalogs that they send out to people, and it's several dollars per person just to get the catalog out, let alone buying the list of people that you might market to, which costs a few extra dollars a head. So they are always looking for ways to identify new people to market to, and they have an e-commerce system set up that honestly has not been updated in a handful of years, and they don't have the internal resources to spend energy on a revamp. So a lot of their data is just kind of sitting there in a database, and they can't do too much to query it, except that they had access to our product, and they were looking for unique people that were not on the mailing list. And this person inside the organization that actually worked in logistics and shipping said, hey, I have an idea. I'm noticing that there are a really large number of people that are buying from a particular billing address and then shipping to a completely different location in a completely different name. And we don't have a checkbox on our website where we can check gift order. This is a gift. So we don't have any way of telling whether or not something is a gift order. But what we can do is have human beings look at a certain population of these and come up with rules that are very high reliable predictors as to when somebody has bought someone else a gift. And what they found was, and their database, by the way, goes all the way back to the 70s. They found thousands and thousands of people that had received as gifts products from their catalogs, but were never buyers or people that were on the marketing list to begin with. And running a really simple query through our system, they were able to add something that would have probably cost them tens of thousands of dollars in terms of the quantity of users really rapidly and feed it back in, knowing that every single person that they now sent that catalog to was going to be somebody that had used a product before, that was familiar with the brand, that knew what it was, which greatly increase the value and the likelihood of them ending up purchasing. And I bring this up just because there's really this is such a quick one and done, and you can compare it to a lot of these other more involved things here, but when you've got data that's at the fingertips of people within the organization that don't need to worry about its quality, but do know that it is available when they have a question or when they want to go explore something, you can get really rapid, quick wins. And I think this is a perfect application of just narrow application based on great data infrastructure. In the last couple of minutes here, just really quickly, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about driving usage through different behaviors. And in this particular case, I'm going to go back to the RJ Metrics example where we have all of this event data that we talked about before. Only in this case, I want to talk about customers that we already have. And efforts in our world, customer retention and churn is a really big area of focus. We want to make sure that people are engaged and that they are coming back and using the product really deeply. So we capture all of this event data on customers too. When they log in, when they access a dashboard, when they load something versus create something versus share something. We've got all these individual data points. And we were able to create this data set that was sliced by individual user IDs inside of our company, and then gave us some numbers over different time periods as to things like reports created, reports edited, viewed, et cetera. And we had this question as to whether there was a population of customers that we might want to target with different kinds of training than other populations. Some we wanted to push toward editing at all, but some are already editors and we wanted to push toward maybe connecting new data sources or maybe push them toward including different things in their analyses. So we decided to use a cluster analysis. This is actually a project that was done during a hackathon. I feel like, Mike, did you do this? This might have been somebody else on the team. It might have been Jim, yeah. So this is a really cool hackathon project that had some pretty interesting results where basically Jupyter, which is kind of an online Python data analysis notebook system, was used to pull in all of this input data and run a k-means cluster analysis against our customers and see if we could identify populations in our customer base that behave similarly to one another. And again, if you're familiar with kind of machine learning and statistical analysis, maybe all those terms are not that confusing. If you've never heard those terms before, it's so much less complicated than it sounds. And a lot of this can be implemented in relatively short amounts of code. And what we found here, this was the visualization of the output. And I found this so fascinating because there are 4 red X's here, each one of them representing a different population of people in our user base. And this thing did such a good job of identifying 4 different user personas inside of our product. One of them was these ones where the behavior was really weird in that it was viewing reports like crazy but not creating that many. We looked at all the email addresses of people that were in this cluster. Display at, metrics TV at, TV analytics at. This was people that had logged into their RJ Metrics account, put it on a TV on the wall, installed the Chrome extension, and just had it refreshing and refreshing and refreshing. And it was amazing how effectively this cluster analysis just identified this population of people right off the bat statistically. We also had this other cluster here where these are people that are almost never creating reports, but are viewing reports really, really actively. So they log in all the time. They're just not creators. And we looked at the individual users in this population, and we cross-referenced it with a LinkedIn database that we had of all of our connectors and their titles, all our users and their titles. These were executives. These were CEOs. They were board members. They were people that were in a role where not only were they active consumers and not creating things, but they were not likely to create things. Our marketing material saying, hey, why don't you log in and create a new cohort analysis inside of this tool, we're going to go waste it on them. They were going to be confusing to them because it's not their priority or their job to necessarily create new analyses or discover new insights. They're all about consuming the product, which left us with these 2 populations, which was really about opportunity. So we've got this population here, which is our dream cluster. These are the people that are creating and viewing and editing. They are the super active users. They are the people that are going through and behaving in the way that we wish every single customer would behave. And then we have this population of customers that is almost there, that is close, that is demonstrating behavior that shows a capacity to potentially create, a capacity to get more deep within the tool, but just aren't all the way there where they're using it as aggressively as our most active users. So this gave us the opportunity to identify, again, hey, with our content marketing, with the work that we're doing inside of account management, which cluster do you fall into here? Is this somebody that we want to use you for an upsell, selling a bigger license, selling more product? Or is it someone where we want to push you a little bit further, we want to educate you more before taking you down that road? And this is precisely where this kind of analysis can come in. And again, here, we're just using the same exact data and the same exact tools that we had all along. So one last thing that I want to spend a minute on, which is we talked about behavior before in the context of getting people to convert or knowing who to market to or educate better. I want to talk about behavior in the context of driving customer lifetime value. So when you're in the e-commerce use case again here, this is some benchmarking data we pulled from hundreds of online merchants that really shows the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle in full effect here, in that in this large study of e-commerce retailers we looked at, the top 1% of purchasers represented 19% of the revenue in these businesses. And this is a very, very consistent trend that we see both in averages, in medians, and in individual cases. The case where a drastically disproportionately small number of people is having this outsized impact on the amount of revenue being generated by companies. So much so that even like this top 1% generates 90% of revenue. That's an interesting little factoid. The one that blows my mind is that on average, the top 50% of customers generate 84% of revenue. So when you think about your customer base as somebody that's selling something online and you're going and making that effort to go and get people to buy more. You're sending an email that might cost a lot of money, that might impact your deliverability rates, your unsubscribe rates, or any number of different things. You're investing in technology platforms that can operate at scale and communicate to very large numbers of people. If you just took your bottom half and cut it off entirely and didn't do anything to market to that population, you could cut your costs and your deliverability concerns in half and still get 84% of the exposure to the opportunity. The trick is you've got to know who this top 50% is. You've got to know where to draw that line and how to identify that population. And for us, we work with a bunch of different types of companies, but the last big visual I want to show you here is in and around subscription commerce, because we have a subscription commerce customer that uses a number of segmentation tactics to really deeply identify what profiles of customers are truly their most valuable and the ones worth spending the energy on getting those incremental dollars out of. This is a kind of a tree diagram that probably looks a bit confusing, but I will step you through. $150 is the customer lifetime value of the average customer in this online store. And if you ask a lot of online retailers or people that operate businesses, what's your customer lifetime value? A bunch of people won't know it all. The people that do know are going to be really proud, and they're going to give you one singular number. They're going to say, my customer lifetime value is $150, and because of that, I can spend $150 or $149.99 to acquire a customer and feel okay about it. That's all well and good, and that is much better than not knowing at all. But it is such a small scratching of the surface in terms of the depth of knowledge you can have around what your real customer lifetime value is. The answer to what's my customer lifetime value is it depends. And it depends on any number of factors that you can potentially slice these populations by. In the case of this subscription retailer, this was something where people could come to their site and either buy a single item, subscribe so that they get the items on a recurring basis, or buy more than one item in that first order. And just that initial behavior, just steering people into that direction, determined a 2.5x variation in customer lifetime value. People that show up and buy one item on average had a CLV of $100. People that showed up and subscribed on that first order, and this includes people that immediately unsubscribed. It includes people that only got one order in the subscription and then canceled the subscription. All of that factored in, still $250 customer lifetime value, 2.5 times as much as this. So when this company thinks about what do I want to be promoting on my homepage, what do I want to be driving when I'm attracting people through pay-per-click ads, they now know that they can spend 2.5 times as much, or they can consume 2.5 times as many page views of opportunity to grab these subscribing orders. These are the people that end up in that top 50% that represent 80% of your revenue, or the top 1% that represent the top 20% of your revenue. So this is a really big thing to identify here. And what was neat is that once they had these populations, there's no reason you can't slice again by other dimensions. They had enough data that they could do this in a statistically responsible way. And they also do a lot of international shipping, so they started looking at domestic versus cross-border and identifying the difference in customers that come from different countries or ship to different countries in light of their behavior around subscriptions, and really identified these buckets where it turned out that domestic customers that subscribed on their first order had an even higher CLV, a $300 CLV, so twice the overall average and 3 times as much as somebody who just comes in and buys. and truly 6 times as much as somebody who comes in and buys and ships something over a border in order to get it. So really, at this point, you're talking about a 6x difference in CLV here that allows for the mass customization of the strategies that are getting deployed. And that really allows you to have a good sense of loyalty based on segmentation. So where we come out here is like, what a time to be alive. This is so much more fun than going back to 2008 and me standing up here for an hour and talking about how we built this awesome PHP dispatcher system that is going to fire off these events so that MySQL hopefully doesn't crash when we're overloading it every single night. And that is what this version of this talk was just 8 years ago. So it's a pretty amazing period in time for us to spend less and less energy on the configuration and building of systems as operating companies to get our data situated right so that we can actually use it. And we can spend more and more time on the actual applications of that data. And that is why lean analytics at this point in time is something that every single company should find a way to practice, even in light and in context of a bigger, broader analytics strategy. Getting people to have their hands in the data, make agile decisions, test assumptions is a thing that can be extremely empowering. And every single example that you saw here is an example of that. Whether it was something done in a hackathon or done by somebody that worked in a warehouse, the key was that the data was readily available and the systems were in place. And because of that, these bold new insights came out, and it changed the way these businesses were being run. Boom, right on time, not too bad. Thank you so much for spending time. I do have a little bit of time for Q&A. I'm not sure if we're running over, but if anybody has any questions, I am happy to take them. I'm also happy to just stand here and stare at everybody real uncomfortably. Oh, you want to do that, huh? Hey, I got one. All right, yes. Oh, we've got a portable mic. Thank you.
Yeah, for your Redshift cluster, like how many nodes did you have up, and like how often
the exact human beings who know the answer to this question are in this room. Our largest Redshift clusters in RJ days, 64 nodes? I think 32. 32. Yeah, we had multiple clusters that would get different clients with different demands kind of placed on them, and I guess the largest ones were 32 node. Great question, thank you. Got one more here.
Thanks. What does lean analytics look like for a company that doesn't have online products, doesn't do online sales, like a consulting company, 10 customers at a time? What kind of analytics can you do?
So I think there's kind of 2 answers to that question. There's the meta answer, which is presumably you're a consulting company, so you have clients, right? So there's a ability for you to directly use these tactics within the context of your consulting. So you could actually implement some of these ideas into the way that you deliver your services, maybe make your team more efficient, maybe make you get more bang for your buck per billable hour or per hour that's not billed behind the scenes. So there's kind of that piece. And then there's the meta piece, which is you can run these analytics on the analytics that are being run by the people that you are working for. And by that I just mean internal operational efficiency. So we've done some of the craziest stuff. Particularly, this tends to pop up in hackathons at Stitch and did at RJ as well, where we're just looking at things that are going on within our universe of actually operating our company. We did some really cool stuff. You can find an old blog post on it around recruiting. So when we hired our first office manager, it was a role where we got overwhelmed with applicants, and we had to figure out a way to make sure that we gave everybody a really fair look, but also found some kind of fair, non-biased means by which we could kind of at least cull down the initial applications down into a pool of people we would interview. And we used data to do that. And it's not something where it got us a new customer. It's not something where it got our customers new customers, but it made us more efficient, and it made us feel good about doing right by the people who were stakeholders in our decisions. So I think there's a way to have a philosophy around this stuff that has it infiltrate all areas of your business beyond just selling another good online.
Awesome, thanks.
Sure. All right, I'll take that as a win. At Robert J. Moore, if you want to get in touch with me, everybody go sign up for Stitch, stitchdata.com. Thanks.